This is the Math Map Book Club, where ordinary parents encourage one another to develop an extraordinary appreciation of math. We love what we know and struggle over the unfamiliar. Through weekly conversation and exploration among friends, we can begin to enjoy ideas that seem difficult. Join our book club as we discover how math helps us to know God and to make Him known.
Welcome, everybody, to our first meeting of the 25-26 academic year book club. It is July the 30th, and we hope that most of you are still enjoying your summer and recognize that we are starting hopefully a couple of weeks before everybody, so that you have resources that can help you as you prepare to lead your homeschool. So that's why we're starting in July and hoping that you guys are still enjoying a little bit of summer before you jump into the rigors of the academic year. If this is your first time joining us, I want to make sure that you know that this is intended to be an interactive time. So the idea here is that if you have questions, you can throw those in the chat. Or you can certainly, if I ask, when there's a question, you can certainly feel free to jump in and share. Your input is what makes the book club a book club, and not just, that's why we're not just recording this. That's why we're on here live. So I want to make sure that everybody here, especially if you're new, knows that you are welcome to interact. We do have a time at the end of every book club for your questions. So if you have a question that isn't answered throughout our time together, or perhaps isn't related to ex nihilo, there will be a time at the end, and you are welcome to save your questions and ask them then if you don't get them answered, as I mentioned, during the course of our time together. So we are indeed starting back at lesson 1, and so you will notice here that we've got a new little tag on our home screen here where we are talking about the math map at home. So last year we used complex and we talked about what the math map looks like in community. And this year we are going to be talking about what you might do with the math map at home. I just want to make a quick note here that what you might discover is that there's a lot more variation for at home. In community, we have a tutor who is providing a somewhat consistent experience with all the other tutors. At home, you're able to tailor your experience to your learners and your students in your homeschool. So each week, we're going to try to share some different strategies. So you may hear something today that's really helpful, or you might go, that wouldn't work for our family. And I encourage you to come back next week, because maybe next week we're going to share the gem that will unlock what you're doing in your homeschool. So hopefully there's things every week that are helpful, but we're going to try to, over the course of our 30 weeks, address a lot of different ways, certainly not all the ways, but a lot of ways that you can tailor the curriculum at home and work with your students to learn to love math. So with that said, we are this week using ex nihilo. I want to point out that what we're going to do today is not really talk so much about the booklet ex nihilo. There's a lot of great resources already created to help you work through ex nihilo. If you don't know how to find those, you can certainly throw that in the chat, and Babs or Shauna will help you to connect with those resources, or you can email the math map at classicalconversations.com and they will help connect you. Instead, today, what we're going to do is we're going to talk through the recommended flow of the math map at home. And then what the tailoring is going to be how you would maybe interact with each of those pieces specifically. So with that said, every week, we are going to ask you to start your days with flashcards. So you'll hear Leigh, every time she talks, she says that really the best thing that you can do is start with flashcards. The flashcards are an efficient way to load the grammar. It's an efficient way to help students memorize information for quick recall. When we talk about math facts, we have computation facts. such as the addition and multiplication flashcards, or we also have other grammar that's related to math, and you might encounter that through our notations flashcards. The fractions flashcards may have some computation and some non-computation grammar. Together, these flashcards are going to help your students to load that grammar in for quick recall. One thing you hear Leigh continually encourage us all is to read first. A lot of us like to jump in right away to the work without reading. And when we do that, we sometimes miss important information that are in the instructions. It's the same with anything new that we're encountering. The flashcards may be new grammar for your student, so you don't need to start through those flashcards simply by drilling them. It might mean the first few times through a flashcard deck that you're going to read and have your student repeat after you what the answer is. So I wanted to encourage you, first of all, to be gently starting with your students when you're looking at the flashcards. Another thing that I wanted to encourage you about when we're talking about the flashcards is avoiding the temptation to say, my student knows this, and putting it aside and not including it in your practice. While it's okay to bring some of the ones out that are a struggle and practice them more often, when we keep in familiar flashcards or flashcards that our students have already mastered, it's going to give them some encouragement that they know this, and then they're going to actually build their confidence for the other flashcards that are perhaps a little bit more challenging for them. So we want to avoid always making our students feel like it's hard by including opportunities to celebrate what they know. So I just thought I would offer that as our strategy for flashcards today. And each week we're going to talk about what some other strategies are. And I certainly encourage you to share yours. So does anybody have any ideas or things that they've done with flashcards that they would like to share?
Well, we just, finished the series about games, and I feel like it's really easy to use the flashcards in a lot of games. So, if you pick a game that you love that doesn't require you to do anything except move a piece, you could always include your flashcards in the game to get them, used to some of that new grammar or work on some calculation. If they already know how to play a game, then it just adds to the game. So.
That's a great reminder that our flashcards we don't have to sit there and just flip the deck through in order for those flashcards to be helpful. Great.
I think it's also good to not be overwhelmed. Like, you don't have to go through this entire deck. We're like, maybe we do, 10 cards. And sometimes I'll pick out ones that are a little more challenging. And like, especially with the notations, if there's a long definition, it's fun when you've mastered those, but it's hard to do if you're going through the entire deck each time. It's like new each time. So I'll just focus on maybe a few that are really difficult, and we'll make up hand motions and really get to where he thinks it's fun to say that an algebraic number is a number that is a root of polynomial, adds to that successful feeling that you were talking about.
Another thing that I just learned from another parent, she found a list of all the notations with the definitions. I think she got it on Connected, but I'm not sure. And she puts 25 cards out, and then she reads off the definition of one of them and has her student point to it. And then she has them repeat the definition before they go to the next one. So every day she pulls out 25 random cards. And I think that's a good way to mix them up.
It's a great way. Takes that pressure of the student off of being able to say it, but they're still making the connection. That's great. Great ideas. So after we warmed up our brains with our flashcards and we practiced our grammar, our encouragement is that on day one, you would then talk about the covers. Notice that the covers are the same for every single domain. So all of your students, no matter what domain they're using, can be looking at the same piece of art, the same quotation, the same reflection, and you can engage in a family conversation. I would encourage you to perhaps keep the covers handy and let them become a part of your family conversation. So maybe on day one, you have a more structured conversation, but you could bring that conversation back in at dinner time when you're talking about what you did that day, or keep it handy as something that you may talk about in the car. So that it provides a way to really engage your whole family in one conversation in a somewhat unthreatening way, because we can almost all find something to talk about when we're looking at an image. This also makes me think we've been reading make sure I get his name correctly, Stratford Caldecott's Beauty for Truth's Sake. And he talks about the importance of pulling in poetry and beauty and art as the way we introduce things to our children, that's what's going to draw them in to wanting to understand it more deeply. So that's why Leigh, in her wisdom, Leigh said, hey, we're going to have art every week so that we can draw students into this conversation about math. So each week, again, what we will do is we will give you some strategies for having that conversation and ways that you can maybe pull in our 15 skills of learning. So for example, here today, if we just use our skills that are related to Memoria, that has the acronym names, that's what we may be familiar with those skills of, right? We can look at the art and what could you name? We might ask our students to attend to the shadows and ask them, where do you think the light comes from? I like to think of attending as ways we can use our senses. So we could ask our students, what do you think that the angel hears? What do you think that those shapes feel like? What does that sphere feel like? What might it be made from? So those are some ways that you can attend, look closely at the art, is by thinking of sensory questions that maybe your students can answer. Some things when we look at this that may be worth memorizing, not all in the first year, but over the course of several years, our students are going to learn to memorize the title and the number of the booklet. They may even remember what the art is. I know Babs shared a great testimony on Facebook the other day of a student who saw the piece of art from number notation somewhere else and recognized that piece of art represented number notation to her. So our students are going to become familiar, and that's something that we could think about memorizing from our covers themselves. This image has a lot of things that we could express, perhaps through Play-Doh. So when we think of expression, we may be thinking of things we can act out or things that we can create. So how could we use Play-Doh to create something from this image? And I think a great thing for our students is to tell a story, right? When you see an image and a piece of art, what story could you tell based on that? Does anybody have anything that they have experienced looking at the title of Ex Nihilo that they'd like to share?
So for some reason, students in my Challenge A classes have always noticed the animal at the bottom of the screen. And some said it was a dog, others said it was a different animal, but that he looks malnourished and nobody fed him. And that could be why the angel looks sad in the picture, is because nobody fed the dog. And it always makes me think of, did that happen in your house? Like, did you forget to feed the dog? Your mom was upset, and and that made him think of that. So I don't know. I always remember that for some reason. And so it's just like noticing the detail of the picture, because I think I might have just overlooked the dog looking for something else that I thought was more important. But there's so much in this picture that you can always find something new, coming back to it.
really like what you just said, Babs, because I hadn't thought about that dog either. And the angels are so intent on trying to figure out how to copy God's creation and what did he.
Leigh, we lost you temporarily there, but I'm guessing that what you were thinking is that you see the angel as trying to copy God's creation and thinking so deeply about that that maybe the angel forgot to feed the dog. I don't know if that's where you were going, but it makes me realize how often I was grateful for my mother who has lived with us for most of my children's lives. And I've always told her she made me a better mother because I can get tunnel vision. And so if I get involved in a project, I might forget to feed my children. And she was always there to have my back so that my children were not malnourished. I think you also made a great point, Babs, about coming back to this, that what our 5-year-olds see and what our 15-year-olds see may be different. And as we have these conversations year after year, we're going to learn something new every year. Our children are going to learn something new every year. And so it may seem as though, oh, well, we've seen this before, but what a great opportunity to remember that repetition doesn't have to breed contempt, that it can breed a very comforting familiarity and that we can still grow through that.
Someone's at the front door.
And so I wanted to share with you, because I just heard this song, that Leigh likes to quote, I think it was Chesterton that said, about God, making the sun every day come up every day. There's a song by Stephen Curtis called Do It Again, where he uses that same quote. So if you want to be encouraged, it's a short song. You might enjoy that reminder that repetition there's a holiness to it, because there's so much repetition in creation that speaks to God's faithfulness to us.
I'm glad you brought that out, because that is a question we get a lot, is aren't they going to get bored seeing the same art cover every single year? And I mean, I always think they're going to mature also, like every year they're going to be in a different place. And so they're going to see things differently, even from year to year, from challenge A to challenge B, or challenge B to challenge 1, or, whatever the age is. They're going to see things. It's just like when we read the Bible over and over, when we're in a different place, if we're going through something different than the last time we read this particular chapter, we're going to get something different from it. And so, or we could. So, I'm glad you pointed that out, because that is a question I think, some families have had.
And I
Well,
think
you and I keep learning new things every time we look at these covers, and we've been doing this for a number of years now, and we still keep seeing new things.
it seems too that the information that they get when they're in different challenge levels or learning different foundations facts, like that energy cannot be created or destroyed, that's out of nothing. So does nothing come from nothing? Or once it's created, it doesn't go away. It changes form maybe. And then the idea of in philosophy, if they're still doing this in challenge 3, you never step in the same river twice. Maybe you never look at the same art twice either.
That's a philosophical question. So the next item that is on the schedule for day 1, and when I talk about the schedule, I want to call your attention to the left-hand image. The math map image that's on the left is from the foundations level booklets. The image on the right is from the challenge level booklets. Notice that the map is the same, but on the left-hand side, we are providing some hints for how you might use this at home. And these hints are what are forming the outline for what we're talking about today. We're really going through the outline today. And then each week, we're going to use the same outline to go through and talk about the elements of the lesson. So we did our flashcards. As you can see, I'm going to turn on my highlighter here. So we did our flashcards. We did our cover conversation, and now we're talking about the math map itself. The goal of the math map is to help our students to really take what they're learning and put it into a big context and see how it's interrelated. Instead of seeing math as different little topics, to see how there's one unified whole and how those topics fit into that. Certainly, there's a lot of topics that are not on our math map, but these are what we think are the essential topics that would first help students to know God, and two, prepare students for any further work that they'd like to do in mathematics. So as we look at the math map each week, this is an opportunity to review what domain our students are working in. And that image at the top that lists the domains is intended to act as a type of Euler diagram and show you how those domains are nested within one another. And then down the left-hand side, you'll see how the topics are arranged by dimension. And then where those check marks are on this side and here are check marks to say this is where I am this week, because it's always good to know where I am, what has come before, and where I'm going in order to have a successful journey. So that's what we're going to talk about each week with the math map. So at home with our students, we can talk about that on week 1. Where are we? In community, students will be doing that also. Notice that we've also given our challenge students some hints as to the types of notes that they might take. This page is intentionally left blank in most of the booklets to provide them a place where they could maybe take some notes in community or while they're sitting down with mom, and have those notes be in one place alongside their daily work. So this is really intended for the challenge students to be their note space, whereas for our younger students, they may not be taking notes, but we do want them to engage every week with where they are on the math map and becoming familiar with the structure of the map. And so that's what else is on day 1. So we're going to work through days 2 through 4, following this same outline. So the last thing that we would do, we've done our flashcards and we've talked about our cover, and we've looked at the map on day 1. The next thing that we're going to do is look at our lesson pages. If you haven't before, I want to call your attention to the fact that there is an intentional mapping from domain to domain. If you look at these 3 pages, you'll see that in this case, the content is consistent. It is the same. But in weeks 2, 3, 4, and so on, you're going to see that the bars are almost the same from domain to domain. As our students get older and that font gets smaller, things may shift around a little bit. There may be a little bit more on a page, but the fundamental ideas in those sort of mid-colored bars, not the top one, but those mid-colored bars, you're going to see from domain to domain so that you can easily map and see how concepts are looked at in each of those different domains. We're going to talk in future weeks about different strategies that you could use to fit your family's needs best. But today I want to encourage you to experiment. That what might work for my family may not work for Jill's family. But she might want to try how it worked for me. And then she might want to try what worked for Babs. And then she might say, we did it this way. And as I do that, I can take these different ideas and find the one that works best for me. So I want to encourage you each week to listen to the strategies that we offer, experiment with them, and then feel free to share things that have worked for your family. Some things that you can think about when you're doing that is to allow students to compare their domains to get hints to their own work. So that's going back to that idea of the intentional mapping, is that those comparisons between domains are going to help your students. It's going to help your older students to see how ideas have built, And it may also encourage your younger students to see where they're headed. They may not understand their older students' work, but they may be encouraged. We know that younger students are oftentimes competitive and they like to play catch up. And so simply seeing that there's a commonality between their work and an older sibling's work may motivate them to do the work that's necessary to get to where their sibling is. Specifically for lesson 1, we would encourage you to look at the booklets together to orient the students to the curriculum. So if you haven't gone through Ex Nihilo before, I just want to point out that the tops, especially in your first year, where you want to focus is in this top section. That top section is going to step you through all the elements of the booklets, all the elements of the resources and the curriculum, so that you know what resources you have and what the different parts of the booklet look like.
Hey, Kirsty, we're not able to hear you. I think it was feedback and then it kind of dropped off.
Okay, I'm sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yes, but it's kind of going in and out.
Okay, I don't know. Let me see if I can figure out why. I know in Teams is it any better now? Oh, wait, I see why.
Technology. Can't hear anything.
I don't think she's talking.
Okay, is that any better?
Keep talking.
Okay, so it's for some reason, my computer is not my friend today and it's not picking up my earbuds.
Yeah,
So
you sound good.
okay, thank you. I'm going to try my earbuds one more time because that'll do a better job of blanking out the background noise. Okay, well, I am sorry for.
No, we lost you again.
Okay, anything this time? Okay, I am sorry. Yes, technology has not really been my friend today. So as we look at orienting our students through the curriculum, what I wanted to point out is that that top section is really where you want to focus your first year or maybe 2. If you read those sections and look at the corresponding parts of the booklets or the resources, that's going to help your students to feel familiar with their tools that are in front of them. If you have done that and you feel like you're ready to stretch your mathematical chops a little bit, then that middle section is going to introduce you to some of the mathematical ideas of thinking about nothing. Let me really emphasize this because every year we have people that jump into that middle section and think they have to understand everything that's in there. It is the same for every year. And so your younger students may not be ready to interact with all of those ideas in the same way that you as the parent are. So some of that may be for you to start thinking deeply about nothing, and then you can introduce that conversation to your student. There may be ideas in there that your students have not interacted with before in a mathematical way. This is not the place to try and teach them. Those ideas will be examined further on in the curriculum in their appropriate place. So if you look at that middle section and you go, I don't understand this, how do I teach this? I would just suggest you skip that this year because you will see it. And when you come back to it next year, you may be ready to tackle that. The goal is really to think deeply about nothing. What does it mean when we say nothing? How do you define nothing? What does ex nihilo mean? What is creation from nothing? Just as Jill pointed out, that idea of we know some things from science and then we know some things from the Bible. How do we start putting those ideas together? So I really want to encourage you to use that middle section to create wonder and not to create stress. And then the bottom section, you're going to notice that the bottom section here says the lesson 29 booklet. So lesson 29 is a blank booklet. If you have not been through the curriculum before, you may not have heard about that. So let's take a minute and talk about it, because it's something you can start preparing for from day one. And that's why we have it in booklet 1. Lesson 29 is a blank booklet that we call Seeing the Unseen. Recall that the goal of the math map is to help families to see the unseen, to discover God and his order for creation that is expressed through mathematics. The blank booklet in lesson 29 is intended as a place for you to record the ways that you have encountered God through mathematics, or where maybe you've seen math in the creation around you. One of my examples that I frequently use, simply because it's right outside of my window, is the fact that pine trees grow parallel to one another. So when I look out my window, I'm always reminded of these trees that are parallel. And then I think about what that might mean. Why would God make trees that are parallel? Right? Maybe he's trying to give each one, right, their opportunity to grow up towards him without banging into one another. And how is that different to our families, right? Well, we each want to grow up towards God, but he does allow us to bang into each other a little bit more, doesn't he? So that might be the kind of thing that your student might go, hey, Mom, I'm not like a pine tree because I don't grow parallel to my siblings. That could be something to put into your Seeing the Unseen booklet. It's not supposed to be a work of art, although it may feel like one, depending on your student. It is supposed to be a record of where you have seen the unseen. So the bottom section of the Ex Nihilo booklet has some examples of what other students have included in their booklets. And I'm pretty sure that I can say this with certainty, that every single example is something that was generated by a student. We did not sit down at the math map and come up with these examples on our own and claim that they were students. All of these actually came from something that our students did, some kind of student work, so that they are examples of what a student might choose to put in their Ex Nihilo booklet. That's why it's in lesson 1, to encourage you to be watching for those things over the course of the year, and whether you go ahead and add them to that blank booklet, or whether you go ahead and create a folder and then your student can put it all together at the end of the year, is up to you. And so that would be the end of day 1. We would go through 4 lesson pages, and that would be the end of day 1.
May I ask a question quickly?
Absolutely.
I was trying to type this and it just was too much. So once you get past week 1, the top sections on every 4th page relate. But for example, we wouldn't say that the bottom section on each page and each lesson after week 1, those don't necessarily relate to Seeing the Unseen. And the top isn't necessarily the lesson overview. What you're talking about is just for lesson 1. Is that right?
That's correct. Lesson 1 is its own. I love the fact that Babs and Shauna call lesson 1 Ex Nihilo the teacher's guide, because it really is. It's telling you how to use the curriculum. It's giving you that big overview. And then as you get into the curriculum and you start to become familiar with the mathematics, there is some more there for you in the middle to have some great opening conversations with your students. And then, yes, that bottom piece there is, again, more teacher's guide, because it's giving you some examples of things to look for throughout the year. So you're right. Week 1 is very different to week 2. So that's why we're not talking so much in depth about the content this week, but we're talking more in depth about just the flow of what your week might look like. Because even in lesson 2, we're going to talk about doing 4 lesson pages every week, but they'll look more mathematical than this week does.
There's a question in the chat, but Anna T might have to expand. It says, is the top And middle section, we're discussing per page or per group of 4 pages. Is it the top of each page or the top of the first set of 4 pages? So I think she might be talking about after week 1, but if she's on, she
So,
might want to clarify.
yeah, so I'll answer what I think you're asking. At home, you're going to work through 4 pages a day. And we'll talk next week about different strategies for how you could order those pages, but they will not look like this. This is specific to week 1. So I would say if you're in your first week at home, I would just look at that top section of day 1 of page 1, then the top section of page 2, 3, and 4 on day 1. And then on day 2, I would just read through 5 through 8. And then on day 3, I would read through 9 through 12. And on day 4, I would read through 13 through 16 with my students and just have them. So for example, this one says the booklet cover, and I would read what it says there, where it says the booklet cover, and I would have all of my students fold their book and say, okay, show me your cover. So that's what's on our cover. And then I would flip to page 2, and I would take a look at whatever page 2 is about. Does that answer that question? If not, feel free to unmute and ask a clarifying question. I'm going to go ahead and, all right. So that's day 1. And so we're going to move to day 2, and notice that I put day 2 all on one slide. We're going to begin our day by drilling flashcards, and then we're still going to work through, yellow doesn't show up very well on, I can get this to show up a little bit better. Nope. There we, oh, it's black. So we're going to finish our day by working through 4 lesson pages. What's going to make today special on day 2 is that we're going to look at our I² invention page. So as you open up your booklet, you would turn your cover and you're going to see the math map, turn the page, and on the left-hand side, you're going to see the I² page, which is invention, and the I³ page, which is memoria and arrangement. Again, the expectation is that this is a playground for invention. This is not a page where you're teaching the math concepts. You're going to be learning the math concepts through the lesson pages. You may choose some of the material on this page to help you understand some things. It may become a resource, but the goal here is to practice the common topics of invention. So I really want to emphasize that, because there are going to be a lot of ideas on these pages that may be unfamiliar, and the expectation is not that you camp out on this page and teach the ideas, right? That the idea is that we're using this to practice the 5 common topics of invention. We want to practice definition, comparison, circumstance, relationship, and then authority or testimony. When we talk about definition, I loved the fact that Leigh the other day said to me, she goes, we can't compare things if we don't know what they are. So definition in her mind is always the first thing that we need to do. When we look at this page, we may not define everything on here, but some questions that we could ask are, what could we look up? Are there unfamiliar words that you want to look up? You might look for them in the charts, or you might look for them in the glossary. Those are 2 great resources. Just a heads up, if you are looking for a word and you don't find it in the glossary, you can email us. And we are still adding words to the glossary. That's why it's not printed, because we're still building that resource. So go ahead and let us know if you see a word that should be in the glossary and isn't. So that's a definition skill, is being able to identify a word to look up. You can also ask your students what words are familiar. What words could you define from your memoria? And then I wrote it this way: what can we define by class? And I was thinking of that definition skill that we learn as part of exposition, where you say a table is a piece of furniture with 4 legs that you eat on, right? And so I use a class, furniture, and then I specify that it has 4 legs and you eat on it, right? Now that might not define all tables. It may only define the table that I'm sitting at, right? But there are going to be cases where, especially our older students, can start to create their own definitions by using what they know and then specifying. So when we talk about definition, there's several levels of definition that we can use when we're looking at the I-squared invention page. And that's one way you can talk about definition with different ages of students also. Once we know what we're talking about, we can talk about comparison. What things are the same and what things are different. Again, it doesn't have to be a math concept that you're comparing. If you're just trying to use comparison with your younger student, you could, for example, ask them to compare these boxes with this box, right? One has an X in it and one has a number in it. That's what's different. What's the difference between this box and this box? They look like they're the same size. They're on the same row. They're in different columns and they have different expressions, right? Whether or not they recognize that's the same number. So notice that we can talk about comparison even if we don't really understand the math. That's where I say that this is really a playground for practicing the common topics of invention. It's not about teaching the math concepts. That we want to take a few minutes, one day a week, and really take some time with our students to say, how do we use these common topics, right? What are the common topics? And so we can do that even with our youngest. Now, with our youngest ones, definition and comparison might be our most accessible common topics. As our students gain familiarity with mathematics and with the curriculum, they might be ready to talk more about circumstance. A great circumstance question that you can ask every week is, how does the dimension we're in change our understanding, right? How is addition one-dimensional? What do you think it would look like if it was two-dimensional, right? That might be your older students that are talking about circumstance, that we ask those questions. Circumstance is also an idea, right, that looks at place. So you could, with your younger students, talk about the circumstance of where something is on the page. How are things grouped? That might feel like an arrangement question, but it could also be a circumstance question. Just what are the big things that are on the page? Again, it may be for our students that are getting a little bit older to talk about relationship. Are there some things on this page that come first or second? Right? Is there some kind of an order to what we're doing on the page? So how would you put things in order? Those are kinds of relationship questions that we might ask. And then again, this final question probably is for students who have the greatest familiarity with mathematics, because we could start asking them what laws are governing the topic. Right? Do you know of a law that governs this, that tells us why this is true? Okay, and that might require a little bit of familiarity with the concept. But notice again, coming back up here, what is our goal for this page? It is just practicing those common topics of invention. And then we finish our day with 4 more work pages. Those lesson pages, again, that's where you're going to be exploring the concepts. That's where they're going to be practicing the symbols and the notations of mathematics. And that's where they're going to start to be developing their understanding of the concepts, not on this page. This page is the same for all of your students. So these are conversations that you can have with all of your students at the same table. Just as on day 3, you can have those conversations using our Memoria and arrangement page. notice again, what we're practicing are the core habits of memoria, right? And we're looking at arrangement. So one thing that Leigh likes to talk about is the fact that when we're practicing with our flashcards, we are looking at discrete pieces of memory work. We're not necessarily putting them together. The reason why this page is called Memoria and Arrangement is because it takes discrete pieces of information and it's putting it into some kind of arrangement. Oftentimes you might find a table or you might find a diagram that would match memory work so that students see how that memory work fits together. What you can practice on this page is the memory work, right? And that's that memorize in the middle, but we can also practice our other habits, our other core habits of memoria. So asking our students, what can you name, right? Attend again to the arrangement. How is it arranged? Why would it be arranged that way? What do our columns mean? What does our rows mean? What could we memorize? What have we memorized? Right? What hand motions or other memorization aids could we make? So Jana was giving us, I love the fact that she was giving us some hand motions there, right? So that we might have some hand motions that we make to go along with this arrangement. Is there something on this page that we can narrate to tell a story? So those core habits of memoria for our youngest students, again, right? We may talk, when we talk about arrangement, it might be just noticing that there's a table, that our columns have darker lines than our rows. We might say, well, why do you think that is? Right? That there's some boxes that have X's in. What does that mean? So those are some things that our youngest students might attend to and notice, where our older students might go, oh, I see there's a process here, a pattern here and how this is building. And I'm going to tell you a story to explain why this arrangement reveals this pattern. Right? So again, all of our students are going to see the same page, but we're going to be able to have different domains of student, different levels of understanding, interact with it differently. Notice at the top, instead of saying flashcards, we have said to try a quick flip arithmetic game. You certainly are encouraged to continue with your flashcards every day. But we also recognize that the quick flip arithmetic games are a great way to build that calculation speed and accuracy in a different way. And so we want to encourage you by putting it on the day 3 schedule to be using those games as an additional way to build your students' calculation speed and accuracy that goes a little bit beyond the flashcards, because it's going to mix things up in different ways. It's going to let you practice different skills that's going to build on those calculation flashcards that they've been working on and play with some different calculations. So that resource is available on CC Connected. It's available on the bookstore, and we certainly encourage you to incorporate that into your math map experience at home. And then again, we would work on our 4 lesson pages, because that's where we're going to be interacting with the lesson and not just practicing those core habits of memoria.
Kirsty, I kind of wanted to point out, like, these 2 pages, that there's not really, I don't think we can mess it up. Like, I feel like parents are going to think, well, what if I don't say this, or what if I don't say that? And there's not really a wrong way. I mean, we're just going to be asking our students questions and letting them pick out things. And so there's not like, you have to say this today and you have to say this year. So I guess giving parents permission, right? We need to give ourselves permission to just be free with whatever we're discussing on this page, because we're going to see these pages every year. And so we'll keep talking about them every year. So I just kind of wanted to encourage parents that you can't mess these pages up. We're just going to be talking about whatever, like, our students pick out, or maybe some things that stick out to us, but we can't really mess it up.
That's a great point. And Babs, when you said that, I want to point out, because I don't know if I made this clear, that what we're talking about this week is like the big overview. This is the fire hose week where we're talking about, right, what do you do at home? This is not anything specific to one particular week. That next week we're going to talk about lesson 2. And what does lesson 2 look like specifically? And just as Bab said, right, I just said, hey, there's 5 common topics of invention. You might just look at one, right? So next week, we may just talk about definition and what are some things we can define on this page. Just a few minutes. And maybe I spend 5 weeks on definition and then 5 weeks on comparison, right? Because I want my students to become fluent, not in the mathematics so much as I really want my kids to become fluent in being able to define things, right? That's the skill that I want to build up in my student. And so while this week I'm giving you all 5 common topics and all 5 core habits, right? You may just pick one, right? And it may just be a really quick conversation, right? Maybe every week you want your students to pick one word to define, right? So when I talk about strategies at home, this week I'm like giving you everything. And in the coming weeks, we're going to peel that back and say, here's one sample of how you might do this. And so that's a great point, Babs, is to understand there is no messing this up. The beauty of the math map is that you're going to see it all again next year and the year after. So if you miss something this year, you don't have to feel like you've got to go back and fix it, because you're going to get the opportunity to refine it and go deeper next year. So thanks for pointing that out. So day 4, we're pointing out at the top here, we still want you to do the flashcards. You could certainly play more games from Quick Flip Arithmetic, but we also have games on the back covers of every single booklet. Now, some of them are more activities, some of them are more games, and some of them may be pointing you towards other tools. There's a couple like that that say, hey, here's some other things to go and investigate. If you have not watched our summer series for 2025, that's what we did every single week. Was we looked at those games and how to play those games, and how to tailor those games, and how to just have fun with mathematics. So if you're looking for any hints on any particular game or cover, front back cover of the math map, that is your best resource. And if you're not sure about finding the right link, again, you can email the math map at Classical Conversations, and Babs and Shauna will be happy to send you exactly the link that you need to get detail on which particular game you're interested in. Those videos are also going to be linked in the companion, so you'll have multiple ways of accessing that information. This week, I just wanted to talk about the fact that it's named Careful Calculations, and let's define what we mean. We just talked about the importance of definition. So careful, right, means that our goal is to calculate accurately, attending to units, to operations, and any other important details. We live in a culture that prioritizes these timed drills for mathematics frequently. And while sometimes those may be helpful for our students, if they're creating a lot of error because our students are going too fast, then they're probably not as helpful. So our primary goal here is to calculate accurately, to carefully attend to what we're doing as we calculate. Speed will come in time. And then the other note here is that this says calculations. So this page is intended to practice common calculations related to the lesson. Sometimes it will feel less calculation based, but in general, the goal is to practice common calculations that are related to the lesson. What that means is that not all the concepts from the lesson are going to be practiced. So while we say that you can use this as a quiz, using it as a quiz can be an accountability provider, right? It can hold your students accountable if they know that they have to complete this, but it's not going to assess a comprehensive knowledge or understanding of the lesson. So I really want to emphasize that this is not, some of us have been trained to go and look at the test and say, okay, this is what I really have to know, and then go back and teach the lesson with the test in mind. That is not what careful calculations is about. This is not your end goal for the lesson. Really, your end goal for the lesson was on page 1, which is the cover, right? It's seeing the unseen. And so we've recommended to parents that the best way to assess your students first is to ask them at the beginning of the week, hey, what do you think this cover might have to do with what we're talking about this week? And then ask them at the end of the week, well, what do you think about the cover now? What did you learn? So I just want to offer that caveat when it comes to using the careful calculations page. It is a review. It is a great practice page, but it is not comprehensive. And so don't let this be what dictates how you teach your students throughout the week.
I'm so glad you said that, because there are some well-meaning people, I think, who are spreading the rumor, I guess, that you should look at careful calculations first and teach to the test. And there are videos that people are making talking about that, and that is not really a CC approved way to look at it. So we just need to be careful when we're watching other people who are talking about the math map and really CC stuff in general, that just because they're a director or just because they have used the material doesn't necessarily mean that they're doing it the classical way. So I don't know. I just wanted to kind of throw that out there, because I've heard people say, oh, well, I watched this video and the first thing they did was look at careful calculations. And I was like, ugh, sometimes I never look at careful calculations. So I wouldn't say that would be the first thing I would look at.
No, it's a great tool, but notice where we look at it. It's on day 4. It's at the end of the booklets. It is not supposed to, right? This is kind of like the tail. Don't let the tail wag the dog, right? That cover should be your best entry into the math map. And if you're curious, because we just talked a little bit about assessment, so we're not going to talk about that in great detail, but it is good as parents to know how we're going to assess. We have some really great resources in the book club. So if you're looking for those resources now and you have trouble finding them, guess what? Email the mathmap@classicalconversations.com, and we will happily point you to the videos that are going to help you with that. Or you can go to books 15 and 30. In lesson books 15 and 30, the charts are all about assessment. And so you'll find some great helps there. Or if you go to the companion, you'll find not only those charts, but some additional information that might help to unpack what's in those charts and give you even more information for assessment. So I really encourage you to use those resources as you're thinking about how you want to assess how your student has done working through the math map. And just in conjunction with that, I really want to encourage you, as you think about assessment, to also think about your goals. So if this is your first time joining us, you haven't heard me be on my soapbox. So I'm just going to take a minute to really encourage you to feel free to set goals for your mathematics education in your homeschool that do not reflect what the world is telling you. What that means is, don't let standardized testing drive your homeschool. Don't let college admission drive your homeschool, right? Think about what it is that you want your child to learn, right? Pray over that. And if you're in CC, my guess is you really want to first educate your child to know God. And that should be the goal for your math education too. And I just love the fact that Jesus reminds us in Matthew that when we seek first the kingdom of God, everything else will be added to us. So guess what? If we're seeking God in math, we're going to learn math along the way. That's the higher goal, is to know God through mathematics. And so I want to encourage you to maybe assess why you're teaching math and set a goal that really works for your homeschool and assess according to that versus what the world tells you should be your goal. And if you're shooting for that higher goal, all those other ones are going to be met along the way. So you'll hear that. If you go and watch anything about assessment, you're going to hear me on my soapbox talking about having the right goals for your homeschool.
Can I
Kirsty,
say
do you
one
have
more
time-
thing about, oh, sorry.
Do you
Go
have
ahead,
time
Jenna.
for me to add on to that real quick?
Yeah.
So the other thing is, over the years of all the piloting that we did, most parents' frustration was in the first 8 weeks because the topics seemed familiar to them: addition, subtraction, multiplication, division, numbers, and we felt like we knew it all. And so to have to approach it from a definition and a comparison and an arrangement of information kind of perspective, and then looking at the careful calculations, felt like to many that they just weren't going deep enough. But it goes so much deeper than you could ever imagine, and you're adding bigger things, and our young children are learning to add things other than square blocks, but they're adding pi, they're adding fractions, they're doing lots of things. And then in those later weeks, spending time with slowing down and seeing that grammar and practicing with those basic operations, because that's arithmetic, right? And so if we spend time with those basic operations and seeing how many laws impact that, and understanding the different domains was huge for me, and the dimensions was huge for me, and it changed everything about how I learned, and it actually invited me in to higher math levels that I had either never taken or had never really learned and internalized when I was in school. And so it is different. But if we're fine with our children gaining a surface understanding of Shakespeare, but a deep understanding of human nature, or a surface understanding of history, but a deep understanding of consequences and of honoring God, then maybe looking at the deep concepts of math is also more than enough.
Thanks, Jill. Babs, did you have something to add?
I was just going to say just about the careful calculations too, is that feedback that we've gotten this year, because this was the first year, with it rolling out in Challenge a lot of families didn't even get to careful calculations, and it was okay. Like they were like, whoa, there's 16 lesson pages. I don't have time to do 16 lesson pages and careful calculations and talk about the art, and so it's okay if they don't do careful calculations yet, or maybe they might do it every once in a while, so it's another practice page. So if they feel like, okay, my kid got the concepts I wanted them to get, or even if they did 8 pages, but it took them the full allotted time, like I wanted them to work an hour a day, that's okay. You don't have to add on 30 more minutes just for them to do the careful calculation. So I just wanted to throw that out there too, because I know there's going to be parents that want to do every single thing on every single page, and we have to give ourselves permission to be okay with not doing everything.
Well, notice here, I put work lesson pages. I didn't put work for lesson pages, right? So there may be 4 lesson pages per 4 days, but you need to find what's going to work in your family. And it might be that some weeks you get 4 pages done. Some weeks you get 16 pages done, right? Every week might look different. And that's what we're going to talk about every week this year. We're going to talk about all the different ways that you could tailor this curriculum. So remember, today is the fire hose. We're giving you all of it in one big picture, but we're going to unpack this over the coming weeks to help you really feel that freedom to lead math education in your home. So I know that we are over time, so I just want to really quickly remind you of the amount of support that's available to you. The companion is continually being updated. If you checked it out last year and you think you know what's in there, you're wrong, because there's so much more that's been added, and we continue to add content. So go check out the companion. Don't think you know what's in there. The glossary is continually updated. We continue to add videos for all of the exercises on pages 1 through 4 of our released domains. So there's a lot of content there. If you haven't checked it out recently, go check it out again. The forums, there's forums for parents for A and B, foundations, essentials, and tutors. those forums are being monitored by Babs and Shauna, and they will get you answers quickly. Certainly, the more people that are using the math map, you have one another. Right? I love the fact that Cece says that homeschooling with a friend. So get those friends and work together and encourage one another in a math conversation, which maybe hasn't been possible before. You can always email the mathmap@classicalconversations.com. Babs and Shauna work overtime to get those questions answered really quickly. And there is no question that well, I mean, of course, there's questions we can't answer, but I don't think there's a question that's ever come in that they've said, nope, we're not answering that one, right? They work so hard to get you answers, whether it's about math, about the resources, right? If you just need some encouragement, right? I think I messed my child up because I told them that the only kind of roots possible were square roots. How do I fix this? Right? Whatever. Babs and Shauna are your very best resource, and you have direct access to them through email. On top of that, right? Tutors have access to Babs and Shauna every single day live. And they have access to me to ask whatever math questions they want to, which means as a parent, you can go to your challenge tutor and say, I don't get this. And if they say, neither do I, they can come and sit down with me or Babs and Shauna and get you an answer. There's nowhere else that provides that level of support. And I just want to, every week, I want to shout out to Classical Conversations and Leigh for providing that level of support for you. So take advantage of it. Speaking of which, where else do you have access to Leigh Borton's? Every week, right? Sometimes we might have tech issues or she might be traveling, but I would say 90% of the time, Leigh is here every week and she has never turned away a question. So if you have a question, you can come every single week live at 1 o'clock and ask it. And if you are a person that uses the book club as a recording, guess what? Go back to that email and say, this is a question I'd like answered on the book club, and we'll answer it on the book club. So I really just want to continue to drill down on how much support is here. All you have to do is reach out and take advantage of it. And so we are done with our regular content, but we always end with questions, and I will stay on as long as I need to answer your questions. So the floor is yours.
I have a question. I came in really late because my LCD onboarding went a lot longer than I was planning. So if this was in the first 20 minutes, I'll just wait till it gets posted and I'll go back and watch it. Did you talk about how to do the flashcards at home, like which flashcards to use and how many per day? And my other question is, did you talk about how much time per day is kind of expected to spend on the math map? And is that the same for little kids as high schoolers?
So for challenge students, I'm going to go in reverse order.
Okay.
For challenge students, the general expectation is an hour per day per strand.
Okay.
Right. If your student gets done faster than that, hey, that's great. But if they're working hard and they go past an hour, then they're probably going to there's diminishing returns. So I would say, hey, you've done your hour, you worked really well, you're done. Whatever. Now for younger children, I don't know if Leigh is, I think she may have dropped off, but I remember her saying that seat work should be about 10 minutes per year of age, right? So sitting down and doing the math map, I wouldn't spend an hour a day with a young child. Now, it might be an hour if I broke that up and we had a little bit of time where we talked as a family about the cover. Maybe then they spend maybe 10 or 15 minutes tracing. Maybe I give them 2 10 or 15 minute times in the day where they trace and do some work. And then maybe we practice flashcards on the go. So I might break that time up so it's not sort of seat work for my little one. And again, that's going to be if you have a child that loves, right, some of the kids just really love working in the math map and they love to trace, I wouldn't stop them if they want to go longer. But I also, if you've got a fidgety 6-year-old and they get through a page and then they're wandering, I would maybe take a break and then do a little bit more and break it up to meet the needs of your individual student. As
Okay.
far as the flashcards, they're really, not everybody will agree with me. Flashcards are grammar. It's not understanding. It's just memorization, right? So any age student can memorize anything you want them to if you practice it. That said, I probably would recommend that your youngest students are working on the notations, addition, and multiplication first. Then I would probably add in fractions. And then I would start looking at the flashcards that are still in progress, where we're looking, actually, well, I think they came out, did the exponents, right? They came out. So then I might look at the exponents, and then, and the logs and the roots, that pair. And then after that, I'd start looking at the algebra and trigonometry, and then the geometry and the relations. Those are the ones that we're still working on. So that's probably the general order I would go in. But again, it might be that you as a parent goes, I really need to work on my roots and logs. And so I want to work on it. So I'm going to have my 5-year-old work on it, and they don't need to understand it, but they can still memorize it because, right? My son would kill me if he knew I told this story everywhere. But I just remember when he was 4, everywhere we went, he would sing English King John signed the Magna Carta. And somebody asked him once, what's the Magna Carta? And he, with the utmost of confidence, said, it's a tuba. Because if you remember that song, there's a tuba playing in the background, right? So my 5-year-old might not know what it means when they see 5 squared and they say it equals 25, but they can still memorize that. Right. So while there's that order that I gave you might sort of work with how they're developing their understanding in the lessons. If you as a parent wants to change that up, that's okay, because it's grammar, and eventually they're going to slot that into the right place that it goes. We didn't talk about a lot of strategies this week for flashcards, but we are going to, every single week, we're going to start our time together by talking about strategies. And so we had a few testimonies of different ways that people may have used the flashcards that you'll see if you go back and watch the recording. But I also encourage you to come back every week because we're going to try and start every week with, hey, there's another way that you could use your flashcards, and hear how other people are using them also.
Hi there, I have a quick question. I have the book in front of me, and I came in 10 minutes late. I'm confused. It's numbered I2, I3, and those were day 2 and day 3 to discuss with the children. But then it goes to a 1 and a 2.
Those the pages that are 1 through 16 are your lesson pages. And those if you look at booklet 2, you'll see it more clearly, but those are the lesson pages that you're going to work through with your students. If you take the booklet, and Babs maybe can put in the chat, or if you email her or Shauna, there's a couple of different videos where we actually step through the booklets, and that may help you. But if you let your booklet open flat, in the middle is a solutions, right? And those solutions you can pull out. That's why they're put in the middle, and they're numbered S1 through S4. Then pages around the solutions are the charts. The charts are in that blue because they represent the transcendental, the goal of the transcendental student. So the student who's gone through the math map for many, many years, the goal is that they would be familiar, not masters of, but familiar with what is on the blue pages, the charts. So they're there as a reference. They're also there for parents can use those see, hey, how does what I'm doing in fractions connect to this bigger idea, or as a reference, or you can even use those as a way to keep track. Hey, this is something we did this year. Maybe I'm going to circle things I want to come back to next year. So that's why it's a reusable resource, right? So we really recommend people to draw on those charts, take notes on the charts, use those charts to track what went well and what you need to revisit. So those are the pages that are numbered C1 through C4. The lesson pages again are 1 through 16. And then we call them the I pages. That I1 is the math map, I2 and I3 are the invention and memoria pages, and I4 is the careful calculations. We call those the frames, along with the cover and the back cover, because they frame the lesson. And so if you think about a piece of art, right, we tend to look at what's in the middle, just like we tend to look at the lesson pages. But if you've been to a museum, you recognize that the frame around the art is as important as the art itself in many cases, because it draws our eye in, it gives it a sense of space. And so that's what those I pages do, they are framing the lesson, and they are enhancing the lesson and helping to draw our eyes in to the lesson. And so that's why we recommend that you use those sort of 1 page per day as a way to sort of enhance what you're doing with those lesson pages. But again, there's videos that are out there that would probably be really worthwhile in helping you to step through and look at each page. But booklet 1, if you read those tops, that's what it's going to do. Those tops are going to say, look at the cover. This is what it's about. Look at this. This is what it's about. So that's a very quick overview. I hope that helped.
And don't forget that booklet 1 is different. So booklet 1 is more like the teacher book or the resource booklet. When you pull out booklet 2, it might be a little easier to see, like Dr. Gippon was saying. If you look at booklet 2, it's probably easier to see the transition because you're going to see more numbers. In booklet 1, there's more words. And so I always make this joke. It's not really that funny, but I always say, if you open up booklet 1 and you're like, this is a math curriculum, there's more words than numbers. Because there is. It's like explanations of everything. And then when you go to booklet 2, you're like, oh, that's where the math is. So.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for coming today. I hope that you will come back, because I promise you that the coming weeks are not going to be as intense as this week, because we're going to start looking at individual strategies each week. We're going to have a little bit more time for talking about the math topics each week. This week really was like, hey, here's everything that you can use when you're at home. But the expectation, right? We keep saying that the math map is a smorgasbord. If you go to Golden Corral or any buffet restaurant and you try to eat something of everything that's there, you will leave sick and you will never want to eat again, right? So the math map is the same way, right? We don't expect you to go and eat everything at the smorgasbord on your first visit, right? There's things to come in and sample. And over time, you might go, oh, these are my favorites. These are the things I want to do every week. But hey, I'm going to try something new this week, right? But I'm just going to try one new thing this week. And so this book club, this was your smorgasbord. This was like seeing all of it. And next week, we're going to sort of pick and choose a little bit more intentionally to help you kind of catch your own rhythm at home. So as ever, I'm going to stay on until most of you have jumped off. So if somebody's got a question and they were nervous about asking it, I'll be on for a couple of more minutes. But if not, like I said, I hope I see you all again next week.
Thank you very much. I do have one. If
Okay.
It's okay. A student who is very interested in and it's very advanced and is headed into challenge 3. Or no, challenge B. So they've done the math map, or they've chosen not to. And at home, but they're doing it for enough to be involved in the conversations. They've got flashcards, and they are almost pretty much done with that. Like well advanced. They want to do bioengineering as a major or something like that. Like they're really on a strong trajectory toward a career that is very heavy in math. Their goal, the speech kind of encouragement that I gave them about the higher learning, so basically similar to what you gave earlier, is not satisfactory. How do you respond to that? Like, I don't know what to say. I don't know how to. I told them my goal is not to get you to use a particular math curriculum, but really, honestly, my goal was to get them to stop poo-pooing over this one. Like, just relax, right? But how do you respond to whether or not the math map can prepare a child like that?
So, can anybody be everything to every man, right? Only God can do that. So I'm going to start with what I'm sure you've already said to the student, right? That I believe since the first day that I sat down with Leigh and we started talking about the math map, so way back in the very early days, I believe that God has had a hand in this math curriculum. The first thing that Leigh said to me was that she had wanted to have her own math curriculum for almost as long as she's had CC going, because she wanted to be able to support it in ways that she couldn't support somebody else's math curriculum. But she never felt as though God had given her something that was truly classical or truly going to support seeing him through math. And she had prayed for years. And so I am encouraged that Leigh didn't just jump into something easy but not right. She waited until she really felt a clear leading from the Lord. So believing that God has been in the math map since the beginning is what gives me the confidence to say that I believe the math map will prepare any child for what God has prepared for them to do. That if a family has prayerfully chosen to be in classical conversations and God has led them here and he has led us to present the math map, even though it is still being refined, I believe that God wouldn't do that. The amount of prayer that has been prayed over this curriculum, I don't believe that God would be saying, yes, here, do this, if it was not going to prepare students for what the work he has prepared for them to do. So if he has a student on a track to be a biomedical engineer or whatever it is that student is going to do, then yes, I believe that God can equip them through the math map for that. Is everybody going to believe me? We're not going to be able to convince everybody that doesn't want to be convinced, Nicole. That's just the reality. If somebody doesn't want to be convinced, right, they may have to come to that discovery on their own. But I would just encourage them that if they think they know it all, then they should be working through the charts every week, right? And if they really are like, hey, I've done all of this, well, work through the charts and prove to yourself, not even to you, Nicole, but prove to themselves that they understand everything that's on those charts, that they could find problems that go along with those concepts and complete those problems. And I think that chances are they're going to find things that they don't understand and that they need to go and dive deeper into. If they've already worked through all the Saxon books, the lesson pages may feel as though they're not very challenging to them because it's intended to go incrementally, right? And so if you've already done all of this algebra work, they may feel as though they want more algebraic practice. But if they really believe that they are as advanced as they are, they should be able to work through those charts and even using their Saxon resources, go through and find problems that match those concepts and prove to themselves that they really know everything in the math map. My gut feeling is that very few students would be able to do that in Challenge B. But that's a true classicalist, right? A true classicalist would work from the charts and say, okay, I'm going to find a problem or create a problem to practice this. I don't know how to do that. Well, I've got to go and find some examples. I've got to go and find some more resources in order to learn it. I think about Nate Bowditch, right? That's what he would have done. He would have taken those charts and said, I'm going to teach myself mathematics. And so that's what, if you have a child that says, I really know this, I think I've got all of this, then tell them to be a true classicalist and just go through the charts and make sure that they know everything. And that would be the best thing for them to do.
Were you listening? Did you make what you just said? I appreciate that. There was lots in there. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Are you still on the iPad?
Well, it sounds like we've come to the end of our questions. So thanks everybody for being